Rents are going through the roof nationally. Are you a renter who's about to face a rent increase? This guide will explain how to navigate rent increases for renters and landlords. And stick around to the end because we'll tell you what to do if your landlord is doing the rent increase wrong. Now, while this video may seem geared toward renters, landlords, I encourage you to listen as well because these tips are going to apply to you too. Hey there, Christian Walsh, real estate agent with Wire Associates. You are at one of the top channels for renters and landlords and buyers and sellers. And remember, we can't give tax or legal advice, but for the most honest and up-to-date real estate advice, subscribe to this channel. According to Redfin, in February of 2022, rents are up nationally 15.5%. In some areas like Austin, they're up 40% year over year. What this means is that many renters who are month to month or their lease is about to end, they're going to be up for a rental increase. So if you're ready to dive into 8 tips for renters on how to navigate rent increases, hit that like button and let's get started. So important first tip number 1 is you need to know what the local laws are related to rent increases. And while this may seem obvious, you're going to have to do some research to see if rent increases are even allowed. So some areas currently have a rent freeze, for example. LA City is one that does, where rents cannot be increased at all. Some areas have rent control, where there's a limit, there's a rent cap, a limit on how much rent can be increased and how frequently. The state of California has a statewide rent cap bill called AB 1482, and I've done plenty of content on that. In LA County and LA City, there's a rent stabilization ordinance, for example. RSO is what it's known as, and there are limits to rent increases and special rules that must be followed. And it is up to the landlord to know these, but as a renter, you should investigate and understand what the regulations are and whether rents can be increased at all. Of course, we encourage you to investigate current legislation, but also stay in the loop on upcoming legislation that may change things related to rent increases in your area. Number 2, you need to understand how a proper rent notice is given in your area. So if rents can legally be raised, how much notice is required? And how should that notice be delivered? So here's some examples. In the state of California, if a rent increase is 10% or less, it's a 30-day notice. And if it's more than 10%, it is a 90-day notice. So you're gonna do the research to see in your area how much time must be given. Of course, don't forget that you must be month to month or coming up on the end of a lease in order for an increase in rent to be given. Another important point is how the notice must be delivered and if any special language is required on the notice. So you're going to want to research that as a renter and make sure that the notice qualifies. So if a landlord texts you in the middle of the night and says it's rent's going up $500 and make sure you get that to me by tomorrow, that's probably not a legal notice of rental increase. Additionally, in many areas, even an email won't be sufficient. It must be in writing and it must be delivered a certain way. So that's what you need to research is you need to know what is legally required for proper notice on rent increase. Number 3, know thy neighborhood. Know your neighborhood. Know what properties like yours are renting for. So for example, if you're in a larger community, you can visit the community website and check and see what other units like yours are currently renting for if it was vacant, and also see there may be extra units like your floor plan that are renting. That'll give you some leverage with the rental increase if they have a lot of availability. Now, another good spot to check is Zillow.com. That is actually my favorite website for rentals and finding rentals for clients and posting rentals for clients. This is one of the places that has accurate information. And this is also a good resource. You will find a lot of private landlords use it, and you'll find houses and condos, for example. Look on there to see what other properties are renting for. You can call a few landlords on properties that are on the market right now, see if they have a bunch of applications. You need to know realistically what your unit would rent for so that you can use that when you're in the negotiation process. Number 4 is do the math on a move. I think it's helpful to run through this as a renter to decide exactly what the value is when you're staying there. you can put a number to it by figuring out what it would cost you to move. So if you're going to hire movers, you can get a rough estimate there. Even if you're going to do it yourself, you got to figure out how much it's going to cost to get a few buddies to come over, feed them pizza. You're going to factor in the cost of a truck, moving boxes. The other important thing is to factor in your time. Your time is worth money. How long would it take you realistically to move? And then every time you move, you tend to want to buy a few new things, even if the budget's tight. So you're going to have to factor that in. And then after all of that, I still would add an additional contingency factor of about 10%. So that's an important number. You don't need to share that with your landlord, but you need to have your head wrapped around on what it may cost you to move. If the rent increase is high enough and there's another property out there that's less expensive, even though it's inconvenient, it may make sense to move. So you need to know what it will cost and how much time it will take for you to make a move. Once that increase comes, it is time to negotiate. You've already laid the groundwork. You've done the research to know approximately what your rental unit should go for. So you can see if this is an excessive increase. And even if it is a normal increase, there's no reason not to try to negotiate. We have a link below. This is one of our favorite books on negotiating. Never split the difference, because it seems natural. Let's meet in the middle with the property owner and we'll go ahead and go from there. But there's some great tips in this book. We encourage you to read it. In a nutshell, a quick version is pick a small number and a very specific number. So if your rental increase is $300, pick a number like $86.33 and say, this is all I can afford. I ran the numbers, crunched it repeatedly over and over. I can only afford an $86.33 rent increase. There's other great tips in that book, so we encourage you to do that. More tips on negotiation. We're a fan of doing it in person with your landlord or over the phone with your landlord. Now, this may not be possible. You may not be able to easily get a hold of them, but this is the preferred method because when you negotiate, you may be able to make more headway. I know when I negotiate really anything, I want to do it either in person or over the phone. If you're dealing with a community where it's professionally managed, don't forget that the management staff may not have much control. You can attempt to negotiate, but usually it's set from the higher ups. So just bear that in mind. There's no reason, unless they're treating you egregiously, no reason to take it out on them. And I've talked to a lot of renters who understand this. I think this is a great strategy. In many cases, the saying is you get more flies with honey than vinegar. So maybe if they see you working extra hard and being extra nice, maybe there is a little bit of wiggle room that they'll suddenly find in there. There's more tips to come, but if you could do us a quick favor and put in the comments below how you were successful. Give us your story when you were successful in getting a reduction in an increase or even a reduction in your rent. Let us know in the comments below. That'll help me share the message and it'll help the others out there who are watching this video. Number 6, you can also ask for a bonus. In addition to negotiating the dollar amount, you can ask that if you're going to stay and you're going to pay this increase, can you have maybe a new appliance, maybe a new oven if it's breaking down in the property? Can you get new carpet? Can you get new paint? Even just a carpet cleaning. So you can ask for bonuses like this. A few other examples is if there's a garage, maybe ask them to throw a garage in or a storage room. Look at your property and think of additional things you could ask for. Be reasonable, but this may help offset the rent increase and make you feel like you're getting a little something more for your money. And here's a hot tip you may not hear anywhere else, but if you have a sizable deposit and you've been paying your rent on time for a long time, why not ask for some of your deposit back? So for example, in California, they're allowed to have up to 2 months rent. If you've been paying on time, ask for a month's rent back. That will help offset, that'll give you some cash to cover the rent increase. So we're a big fan. After you've negotiated some of those other things, why not ask for this? Get some of your deposit back. You're a good tenant after all. They want to keep you, so they don't need your whole deposit maybe. And the last tip, once you're done negotiating, get it in writing and get it locked up for as long as you can. So while this may seem a little counterintuitive, like why would I want to lock myself into a rent increase for 18 or 24 months? You probably don't want to go through this process again anytime soon. So we encourage you to avoid a shorter term lease or shorter term on the rent increase. Get it as long as you can, 18, 24, even 36 months if you plan on staying there for a while. And you may be a little worried, you may be thinking, well, what if rents drop? Will I be able to renegotiate? And the answer is yes, you can still renegotiate later on. It might take some extra work, but people were able to do it during COVID, for example, get their rent reduced. So don't let the fear of a rent drop prevent you from locking in a rent increase for the long term. So thanks for sticking around to the end. We promise to share some advice on what happens if your landlord does the rent increase wrong. And this is actually very common and the inspiration for creating this video. You need to know as the renter whether they're doing it right. Now, it isn't up to you to train your landlord, but it is also important to note that if you don't pay the rent increase, the landlord may attempt to move forward with an unlawful detainer. So you need to know for sure going in that you absolutely are sure that the notice is not correct, and absolutely reach out to an attorney. So you can reach out to lawhelp.org to find an attorney in your area to help run through the paperwork and see whether it's a valid increase or not. So the question boils down to whether you let them know immediately or later, when the end of the notice, the time has expired and you don't pay the rent. So they owed now or later. Now, if there is a rent freeze and an eviction moratorium like LA City, there's no reason to drag it out. Just let the landlord know immediately. But I leave it up to your judgment. It is probably inevitable that you're going to get the rent increase. If it's done wrong the first time or the second time, eventually they may get the guidance to do it right. So the rent increase is probably inevitable in many cases. You may decide that rather than waiting 30 or 60 days and then letting the landlord know, that you may just want to start the negotiations, even though they didn't do it correctly. Start negotiating so you get to the point where you can lock it in. And during those negotiations, if it gets contentious, you can use that kind of as the ace in your sleeve to say, hey, you didn't give me the notice correctly. I could have fought this a lot harder, but I didn't. I'm willing to work with you on an increase. Let's get this figured out. Let's get it in writing. Let's get it for 36 months, and then we can all move on. So that's my advice on that. If the landlord does it wrong, it is a tough call, but it's your call. Make the decision that you feel is best. And once you've made that decision, just go forward with it. Don't doubt yourself. If you followed these tips and you followed these steps, you've done a lot of the research you need to do, and you're going to do the right thing. You're going to do the best thing for you. Any other questions you have, leave it in the comment section below. Make sure you join over 2,000 others in subscribing to our free weekly email newsletters so you get these updates delivered to your email inbox every Sunday. You don't want to miss. And you're not going to want to miss this playlist if you're a renter or landlord. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Christian Walsh, real estate agent with Wire Associates, and we want to hear from you.